Hello, and welcome to True Horrors with Meg and Rachel. Every week we discuss a horror film and the true stories that inspired, influenced, or bear striking resemblance to them. Be warned for spoilers and adult themes. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Meg.
And this is True Horrors.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 2.
It's my week.
It's Rachel's week. She gets to call the shots.
I get to inflict really pretentious movies on everyone.
At least you know. At least you're not like, everyone. I just thought everyone watched black and white movies.
Didn't we all watch those as a child? I remember when I was a kid and I was like, you know what movie I want to watch? The one in black and white with the weird pacing.
You know what's funny is if you before this had sat me down and been like, do you know the story of Frankenstein? I would be like, yeah, I'm not an idiot. But like, I might be an idiot because I did not know so much. Like there was so much that I just knew from pop culture, but I'd never actually seen the movie. And the movie is really different than what the parodies are and what they also do. The 1930s have something against putting music in the movies. Like it was so weird.
Okay, Dracula is the exact same way. I don't know what it is because I don't know if it's like because it's such a departure from silent films, because in silent films it's all music. So they were like, we're done with the music. We don't want it anymore.
Just no more music. Just because it's something you don't notice until you watch a movie without it, that like it's weird that there isn't music. And then like last week we did Jaws, where a big part of the tension building is the music. The music is very famous. And at every point I was like, we gonna put in some no, we're not.
No
music.
Nope. When I was watching it, I got like a few minutes in, I was like, oh, that's right, this movie has no backing music. And then I was like, wait, I thought that was Dracula. And I guess it's both. Neither of them have any backing music. But I don't know. I've watched a lot of really old black and white horror films, and I feel like most of them have music, and I don't know. So I just don't know. Maybe they started doing that again in the 40s.
I never realized where the man standing in front of the curtain telling you this is going to be scary came from. Like, that's just a reference. And I was just like, oh, this actually happened like in real life.
And I completely forgot about that.
Because they do it on one of the Simpsons Halloween specials.
Yep.
Like Bart comes out and like, you know, when he's doing it, that it's a reference, but I wouldn't necessarily have known it's from Frankenstein. Also, I don't want to be this person, but I definitely didn't think that Dr. Frankenstein was supposed to be attractive. Like, and then he was played by this actor, and I'm like, you're cute. Like, I thought you were supposed to be, like, not cute. Like,
but here's the thing. You know he's not actually attractive because they always shoot him from a weird angle and light him from below. That's how you know he's not an attractive man, Meg.
Is that a 1930s thing?
I don't know. It's just like every time you see him, his face is at a weird angle. Like you never see him straight on. Huxley, you're going to need to
can't
for
see
just like
this,
a second.
People, but Rachel has a greyhound, and every so often she decides it's time for attention. And so you just see her very long face coming into the shot.
She has a lot of thoughts about Frankenstein. She watched the movie with me, and she just wants to discuss it.
She was like, this is pretentious.
I was just worried because she was getting really close to the microphone. I was like, don't sniff into it. I don't need that. Like,
Huxley's fine.
Yeah.
She's doing great for herself. She's got a sweater. She's nice and warm, for those of you who might be worried, because greyhounds do not do well in the cold.
No, they do not.
But I was just really surprised. I mean, maybe they were trying to. Maybe it was one of those Hollywood things where they're trying to make it seem like he's not. But I honestly thought of Dr. Frankenstein. I always think of him being like monstrous, for lack of a better word, for him being very like grotesque and kind of like the idea that he was basically a prince, like kind of like a prince. I was like, I did not realize that. Like, if you had asked me, I would have said Frankenstein is this crazy old man who makes this monster, and he lives in this creepy castle, and all the villagers know he's crazy and awful. And when he makes this monster, they're all like, well, now you both need to die. And then they set them both on fire. That is literally what I thought happened. And I don't know if there's a version where that's what happened, but that was very much not what happened.
No. Well, and I haven't read the book, so I don't know if maybe that's how it goes in that. But even so, I feel like this movie is more iconic than the book. So, yeah, you would think that would be what happens. Also, the fact that it does not take place in a castle is another thing that I had forgotten. They're in, like, some weird abandoned... All I can think is windmill at this point. I know it's not because the windmill is at the end. But they're not in a castle. They're just in a weird tower.
Yeah, which is also just really over the top. Like, the whole time with Frankenstein, I was just like, can you maybe chill? Like,
No.
You're so over the top. You write that weird letter to your fiance. Also, I thought his name was Victor. So I thought all the men's name. Okay, what they call him Henry, right?
They do. I don't know. And I don't know
Is it
if the other guy...
Is it because his father's name is Victor? Because it is. All three men and his best friend, they're all named Victor. All the men in the 30s are named Victor.
No, that's not it at all. Like, yeah, his name is Victor, but in the movie it's Henry, and Victor is someone else. It's the best man at the wedding who is also in love with the only woman in the entire film.
No, but that's
wait, there are maids. I take it back. There were other women.
No, but that's what I'm saying is that because I looked it up because I always think his name is Victor Frankenstein. So I looked it up on IMDb. And they say that Baron Frankenstein's first name is Victor, his son's first name is Victor, and the friend's first name is Victor. So
no, I reject this so much.
I would be able to handle it if it was like his name's Victor because he's like Victor II, but they all call him Henry. But the fact that like they're all named Victor is a way.
So we never get the one who is just called Victor. We never get his relationship. What if he's like an older brother and both the sons are named Victor, but second Victor has to go by his middle name?
I legitimately thought he was a cousin, and I was like, there's only one name in this family. Like, I really thought he was like a cousin because I even wrote down, I'm like, what is his relationship? And then he was the best man. And I'm like, okay, so I guess he's a friend. But there was just a lot of things in this movie I thought were really funny, like unintentionally. Not funny, but interesting was there were a lot of women in that class.
Mm-hmm.
And like, maybe it's just the way I see the past, but I don't see like women in like science classrooms being allowed there to mix with the men until like the 60s. And the fact that it's like the 30s and they're just in there chilling. And I'm like, I know that's wrong. Like that's a wrong view of history. Obviously the women were there. But when they started coming out of the classroom, there was a lot of them. It wasn't like a token. And I was like, oh, cool. I guess that the people who made this movie were like, let's just throw extras in here in this doctor class. Like, I don't know what the class was teaching.
I don't either. But that's an interesting point because this is a pre-Hays Code movie. So you're going to see more diverse roles for women in those types of movies. It came out a few years before the Hays Code.
Can you, for any of our listeners who don't know what the Hays Code is?
Oh, yeah. So I don't know all the specifics of it, but it was basically a code for film. Like, this is what you're allowed to do. This is what you are not allowed to do. So for this movie, once the Hays Code came out, they had to cut a couple of things. Like, they wanted to cut the second half of the scene with little Maria where she gets thrown into the pond. They ended up cutting that out. And then when Victor Henry says that he is God, they cut that line out too. And this is just something I read on Wikipedia real fast, so I don't know how accurate it is. But apparently in Kansas, they wanted to cut out like 32 minutes of, like, they wanted to cut out half the friggin' movie. So a lot of times when that, like, so movies that were made before the Hays Code, apparently, like, you would lose a lot of that. With this one, apparently they rediscovered the original footage in like the 80s or something.
That's really cool.
Right? Which, the thing is, I understand why they would want to cut the scene where he throws Maria into the pond out, because it is a very upsetting scene. But if you cut that scene out, why are the villagers trying to kill this poor man?
Yes.
Like, it makes no sense if you cut that scene out.
I actually wrote that I thought where her father was carrying her through the town, I thought that was chilling. Like that, I thought that was such a good scene. And you just see everyone reacting to this like murdered child.
Yes.
Like, and also that was so me as a child. Like, oh, I'm playing by myself. Hello, random thing. Would you like to be my friend? I was like, I can't even be mad at her. I would have done that. Like, I would have been like, oh, we're friends now. Me and this giant. Like, we're friends. Have a flower. It was also super sad because, like, he wasn't trying to hurt her. He thought she'd float. And, like, that was also a major bummer and also made me think about that old Twix commercial. Do you remember this?
No.
It's basically this scene, black and white, but he has a Twix and she's like, if you have two of something, you should share it. And she just keeps repeating it and repeating it. And then the next scene is he's ripped off his own arm and given it to her instead of giving her one of the Twix.
I have never seen that commercial.
Which, to be fair, same. But that's all it made me think of. And I literally was like, is he about to rip off her arms? Like, is that where that comes from? What does he do to her? But this was actually sadder to me. If he'd actually gone crazy and killed her, like in a very violent way, I would have felt less sad at the end of the movie. Whereas at the end of the movie, I felt really sad because I'm like, he doesn't understand. Like, he doesn't know.
See?
It's sad.
You made fun of me when I first watched this and told you I cried, and now you get it.
I get why you cried. But it was sad. I was like, this is a bummer.
Sad.
Like, it's also like when he kills that assistant whose name is not Igor.
Nope.
Is that
not until later movies, according to Wikipedia?
But like when he kills him, like before he does, I was like, oh, you should kill this guy because like he was taunting him and they never explained why. Like he just kept taunting him, and I was like, you're being so mean to this guy, and he hasn't done anything.
Just to be a dick. That's one of the things I wrote down. Is like I was glad to see that some of these tropes that we still see in movies today existed in the 30s, like. Oh, I'm glad this guy was killed. Like, he deserved to be killed.
Some things that I thought were really funny that I really enjoyed when they cut to scene and it was that large picture of Victor Henry. I thought it was his own house. And I was like, really? Like, I mean, that's fine, but really? Also,
I mean, he is nobility. Like, they do that.
Yeah, I was just like, okay, so you're that person. But I also like that he was digging up the corpses because in later versions, it's just Igor. Whereas this original Frankenstein, he was willing to get his hands dirty for his work. I mean, I was at least like, at least you're not sending people to get the bodies. You're going yourself. That's like partial credit. But the best scene, as in hilarious, in this whole movie was after he brings the creature to life. And they're having to hold him back as he's like, I'm God and it's alive. And it immediately cuts to Victor and Elizabeth with the bear and being like, he's fine. Like, he's just fine. I was like, I had so many feelings about it, but I was like, this is supposed to be funny, but like, you don't really believe that, right? You know, he's not fine. Like, you know, he's not. But that was probably one of the funniest points. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize he's basically royalty. He's nobility. No one knows except for other Victor and his girlfriend/wife that he's the one who made the monster. No one alive, or the creature, however we're going to call it. So he gets away with it. That was also something I never realized. Like, he lives, and at the end it implies that he's going to live and be married. And, like, this is just going to be a weird thing that happened to him for a couple months. Like, this little girl, the doctor, and not Igor, but I care less about that. They're both dead, and no one even knows. They let him lead the search party, and they don't realize he created the monster that killed this little girl.
Which is another weird thing. Like, how do they know that this little girl didn't just slip and fall into the pond? Nobody saw it happen. Like, it was explicitly stated that her father had to leave. Like... And I know they say something about a monster terrorizing the countryside, but like, I don't know. It's all real weird.
Like they don't tell you, but I guess I always like assumed that either they saw that leave and then she was dead and they took two and two together. Because if it was that deep, like he did not throw her very far. Right. It was like it was just really deep. And so you have to think like she wouldn't have gone in just enough to know that like, you know, she wouldn't have gone into the water. But you have to wonder if maybe someone saw him leave or if they just thought this girl is dead. She wouldn't have gone into the water. I don't know if maybe there were bruises, because when he picks her up, she says, "You're hurting me," before he throws her. So I don't know if that, I mean, it's all good questions, and no one's like, it's weird that doctor's been murdered and now this girl's been murdered, and it all seems weirdly connected to the Frankensteins. Like, no one asked those kinds of questions.
No, you don't question royalty.
I wrote like 4 different things in my notes being like, is his name Victor? Is his name Victor? I was just really, but I also wrote down at one point when Elizabeth comes for the first time and he's like, "You'll ruin everything." I'm like, "Your knight in shining armor." Like, just your, like, he's just like, "You will ruin everything."
Well, and keep going. Sorry.
Oh, but that scene is also one of my favorites because other Victor is like, he's like, "We want to come see," and he's like, "No, like I couldn't possibly let you see my lab." And other Victor's like, "You're crazy." He's like, "Crazy. What a crazy man, dig up corpses and mutilate them, sew them back together and make his own creation." Yeah, let's take you into my lab. You'll eat your words. Like,
you know what's funny is the very first thing I wrote was, "Crazy am I?" He said crazily. Like,
they even do a shot where he's like not blinking when he says that to other
yes,
Victor.
Like, that's what I mean. It's like, that's how you know he's not an attractive man, because all the shots he's doing that, like his head is down and at a weird angle and he's not blinking. Like,
no, and I kind of wondered if that was meant to, I didn't really know if that was meant to be him unattractive. I thought it was meant to show he's crazy. I thought it was meant to show, because then the lighting changes when he's like smoking and hanging out with her. So much smoking, Rachel.
So much smoking in the past.
All I wrote on this thing is foreshadowing, and I underlined it like 5 times, and I have no idea why. Like, I don't know why, but there was a lot of foreshadowing in this movie, but I wonder what it was that I was so mad about, that there was foreshadowing. I think it had something to do with it. Oh, when the Baron came in and the torches on the ground and he was like, "You trying to burn the place down?" I was like, "Are you?" Yeah, the last things I wrote was so different from what I thought. He didn't know what was going on, and no consequences. Like,
no,
it wasn't like I wanted something really awful to happen to Frankenstein. I kind of thought they'd both die, because at least he took some charge of the situation. Like, after he killed not Igor, he was not like, no. He was like, "Yeah, let's kill him." Like, that's just such a more reasonable reaction than what I thought we'd get from Dr. Frankenstein, that it's like, okay, he did this, but he was immediately willing to undo it.
Right.
So I just was shocked that it's like this happened, and everyone in the village is going to be like, "I wonder where that thing came from." And it's like, your boss, basically, the guy who owns your town, his son. So,
well, the thing is, he's the only one who could possibly have the money to do that kind of shit. Like, if they just thought about it for 2 seconds.
but they might have thought, I mean, I don't know when it's supposed to take place, but if it's supposed to take place in the 30s, or if it's supposed to take place earlier, but they might have thought it was like a monster from no origin. Like, they might not have been really thinking, where did it come from, and just think it's like a demon monster, and not think as much that it comes from science. Also, obviously, he was going to grab the wrong brain. That was also a really funny scene. Not where he dropped the brain, but where Frankenstein's sitting there smoking, being an arrogant dick, and his mentor is like, da-da-da-da, and he's like, "I got the brain from your lab." That was me pretending to smoke, people. And then the doctor, with no real reaction, he didn't react with horror. He reacted like, "Got you now, you smug bitch." He was just like, the normal brain wasn't taken. It was the abnormal. And you see Frankenstein freak out, and then he tries to pull it in. It's like, doesn't matter. I'm like, it does though, doesn't it? It really does. You know it does.
It really does. Well, and that's the thing, is like, I kind of wonder if they'd gotten the other brain, if he would have been as willing to end up killing his creation. Like,
well, then the argument is also, if he'd gotten the right brain, would this not have happened? Like, what is it
for sure
that made the creature like that? Which to be honest, until he kills the little girl, which is an accident, like all of his killing is in his mind in self-defense. But
right.
even so, I guess the argument could be made, but it's like he can't be reasoned with. He can't be controlled. Maybe down the road he could have been taught some, but it's just like so busy wondering if you could. You didn't stop to think if you should. Just edit Jeff Goldblum into the movie. Just say that. Cameo from the future.
But the thing is also, he made a really weird choice after he brought his creation to life to then keep him in complete darkness for an undisclosed amount of time. Because, like, there's that scene where they first show him sunlight and he reaches toward it and they're like, all right, now we're done with the sunlight. You get darkness and taunted with fire again. Like, is it nature or is it really nurture, Meg?
Also,
like,
one of the best parts is in his entrance scene, Frankenstein's monsters, is the fact that for just the drama of it, he walks in backwards so then he can turn around and reveal himself.
I thought that was so weird. Like, maybe he doesn't know how to walk. Like, he thinks you're supposed to go this way.
The director was just like, I want it to be like he turns around. I'm like, there were other ways to do that made even a little bit of sense.
You could pan.
You could pan up.
You could pan around. It's in a circular tower.
Or they could have, rather than him come upon them, they could have come upon him with his back turned. Just so many choices. And they went with the one that made choices. Because also, if his back was turned, how did he open the door?
So he had to open the door and then turn back around.
Well, he is his father's son. Just the drama of it. Okay. Final thoughts?
Okay.
I think so on our scale of 1 to 10, the likelihood you would survive this movie, you as you.
Well, none of the women are involved in that mob. They all stay at home and look horrified at it. So I think I'd be with those women. So again, I'm safe.
I'm going to say safe because I wouldn't taunt the creature. Mm-hmm. But I'm also not a child anymore, so I wouldn't be like, let's go sit by this body of water. And I can at least swim enough. You know, we don't know how deep that water was or if he, like, cracked a rib or something because she was saying that. But no, I think, you know, we never really decided last time which was which. But I guess 10 is just lay down and die, like you're going to die. And 1 is survive without a doubt. So I think it'd be 1 or 2. Like, I don't see a scenario where I would get like Frankenstein monstered. I thought there'd be a nice verb, but there wouldn't. I just also never want to call him Frankenstein because I don't want someone to be like, that's actually Frankenstein's monster. It's like, we know.
Yeah, no. I thought about opening this with being like, hey, if we say Frankenstein at some point, like, we know. Stop it. Don't care. Have you tried to say Frankenstein's monster or Frankenstein's creation several times in a short amount of time? Like, that's a fucking
We're
mouthful.
very mad at somebody who hasn't said something to us yet. We're just taking this very personal.
We're really good at having pretend conversations. So.
It's on my resume.
It should be.
Okay, so tell me a story of realness.
Okay, so it's not like a super cohesive story because there are elements of a lot of things in this. So again, much like last week, based on a book from 1918 by Mary Shelley. I don't remember the names of, the websites I got these from offhand, but they will all be listed on the internet somewhere.
She means on our Instagram and Twitter, not just like they're somewhere.
Yeah. I was just about to say, by somewhere, I mean these places. So in Germany, there is a Castle Frankenstein. So that is likely where Mary Shelley got the name, because right around the time she wrote this, she was traveling along the Rhine, and that's kind of where this is. It's in Darmstadt. But that's probably not where this came from. A lot of people, I think they do advertise, this is the original Frankenstein for tourism and stuff like that. Not so much. There was a man who lived there, or maybe wanted to live there. I didn't do a ton of research into this guy because he wasn't super important. Johann Conrad Dippel. He was an alchemist, and he created something called Dippel's oil, which it sounded horrifying. I think it was crushed up animal bones in some sort of acid, but it was supposed to be like an elixir of life. So some people are like, oh, he's the inspiration for Frankenstein, but not so much. Much more likely is someone we'll get to in a second. So right around the time this was written, a little bit earlier, I'm suddenly not finding it, 1780. So in the 1780s, galvanism kind of became a thing in science. So it was the idea that you could use electricity to animate muscles. It was named after Luigi Galvani, and I think his theory was that just like our muscles run on electricity, which is not totally wrong. There are electrical impulses in our brains that make our muscles work. But he just called it animal electricity. I think he thought that we were like little electrical circuits. And he was able to build a little like machine that used static electricity that he hooked up to some frog legs, and he could make those twitch. And at some point, he did actually use a lightning storm to do that.
Cool.
So that's part of it, right? But also, can you imagine setting up that experiment? And that's another thing we didn't talk about in the movie, like setting up your experiment, and then you just have to wait for a lightning storm to roll in.
Yeah, like, I don't feel like they do enough waiting in that, though, because it's like they get the body. Did they know a storm was coming? Is it storm season, or were they just waiting? Because he keeps talking about like the freshness of everything, and it's like, how fresh was it going to be if you were like banking on the weather?
Mm-hmm. Like, we can't predict storms super well now, and we have way more technology for that. So the thing about this is that other scientists pretty quickly discredited his work because they were saying, really what you've done is create an electrical circuit just with the metals that you're using. But that didn't quite catch up to the public. By this point, animating dead bodies was kind of like a fun party trick for rich people because, you know, you have all that money and all that time. I guess, I don't know.
There's no TV.
I don't even know. There's no TV, so let's play with dead bodies. Like, that's what normal people do. So that's pretty much where Galvani starts and ends. His nephew, though, Giovanni Aldini, some great Italian names, by the way, decided he was going to start using human bodies. And this was possible because in England in 1751, they passed the Murder Act, which required that all criminals who were murdered by the state to then have their bodies donated to science. And the reasoning behind this was twofold. They didn't have enough bodies for scientists, and it was considered extra punishment. So he started using criminals and like hooking them electrodes up to them, and making them twitch around. The most famous one that he did was with George Forster in 1803, who murdered his wife and child. He drowned them. So just a little fun background on that. But the real guy that I think is probably the most likely to be the inspiration for Frankenstein is Andrew. I'm going to say Ure. It's U-R-E. I don't really know how to pronounce that. Yeah, he legitimately thought he could bring someone back to life
with electricity.
Doing this with electricity. So there were some contingencies. Like, I think it comes up in the movie, like the bodies can't be damaged. So like when they go to the gallows and that guy's neck is broken, they're like, this one won't work. Which I thought was really weird because also when you hang someone, that's the point, is to break their neck. But his most famous experiment was with Matthew Clydesdale in 1818, who was also a murderer. Never mind. I think it's him. One of these guys. I'm suddenly blanking which one. one of the ones who was using criminals. There was a point where the criminal that he used and someone else were hanged at about the same time. One of them died instantly. The other one did not. And that's the body that they used. So again, parallels there. But yeah, this Andrew Ure guy, he changed things up a little bit. He wasn't just trying to stimulate their muscles. He was going straight for nerves, which again, not totally crazy. Like I said, electrical impulses in your nerves. But by putting electrical impulses in the nerves, the movements are a lot bigger. And apparently people frequently got sick watching his experiments, and some man even passed out when he was... Because I think this one was the one that went on for an hour. Like, for an hour, he was like, I'm going to hook electrodes up to this man's nerves and make him twitch around. So somebody passed out. A lot of people had to be escorted out. So, yeah. But it did lead to actual medical technology like
That's
defibrillation.
good.
So, yeah, at least something good came
Can I
out
just
of
say
this.
that scientist wants to reanimate a body and uses a criminal body? That's its own horror movie. Like, that's a terrifying horror movie. The idea that, what if you did? What if you brought back to life like
Yes.
a serial killer? And he was just like, thanks for that. You know, does double jeopardy apply?
I didn't get to kill quite
Does
enough
double
people.
jeopardy apply? Like, can I just go be free? Like, there's so many things wrong with that. But it's interesting how science and horror can be so connected, because so much of Frankenstein gives this really dumb speech, this fake deep speech about pushing limits, that I really enjoy. But I also feel like I also could have heard in like undergrad at 2 a.m. from some guy on like the quad. Like, when he was saying it, I was just like, oh, so some things never do change. Like, some things are always the same. But I think that's why science and horror are so connected, because in a non-pretentious way, it is about pushing those limits. And it is about going outside, which can lead to things like the defibrillator or different scientific discoveries. But there is that thought, if you're, a person with morals, of like, but what if it crosses a line? Like, what if it goes somewhere else?
Yeah, I had one of my research methods professors in undergrad was, when we got to the ethics section, he was saying, like, we need this because scientists are scumbags. Like, you can convince yourself to do a lot of things, like, if you are so sure that there is going to be some sort of scientific advancement, if it's going to save lives. Like, it's fine to inject thousands of men with syphilis because we'll be able to figure something out. Like, no, it's not. But I want to say the official position of this podcast is that it's not okay to inject people with syphilis.
The official position of this podcast is it's not okay to do illegal experimentation on the unwilling. What's interesting about that is so many horror, animal movies, like we were talking about last time, so many of them, there is a scientist who that's their thought, is that like, oh, it's scientific discovery, and sometimes people get hurt, and just this amoral position of it. And so I always think it's interesting when I watch things from the past and you can see things that are still very similar in a non-jokey way, things that are just the human experience, because I feel very far away from the 1930s. Like, I feel very far from that part of thinking. But even like, I was looking at some of them, I'm like, that's some cute clothes you're all wearing. Like, you're all dressed really well in this movie. Like, I could live with that. That fur coat, that was really up your alley. That fur coat Elizabeth wears, I was like, I think Rachel owns that coat.
No, I think that was like fox fur or something like that.
Yeah,
I only own mink.
I definitely totally just lost my train of thought. But yes, science. I was like,
is it because I was being pedantic about fur?
A little. I was like,
that's my goal. That's all I wanted.
What kind of fur you have? What kind of fur coat you have?
For the record, I actually have no idea what kind of fur she was wearing. I really wasn't paying that close attention.
But yeah, so they can justify all manner of horror. But I did think, nowadays this wouldn't happen because, we do have those checks and balances. And I'm like, I think a man willing to rob a grave probably doesn't care about, and then I was going to name the institute, but I can't remember their name now, that you have to go through when you're going to do studies on people.
It's CITI.
Yes,
it's CITI.
CITI.
I just can't remember what it stands for right now.
That's good enough. Like, they probably don't care about doing the online quizzes to make sure that your behavior. Yeah.
Not cheating. Not cheating on the ethics quiz, Meg. Meg didn't cheat on the ethics quiz, by the way. I made her.
Yes.
Take
and
it,
I in no way wanted to cheat on who even cares? I'm not doing scientific research in my life. And that's in the past. It's all in the past, just like this movie. The official stance of this podcast is cheating on things is wrong.
Unless it's a terrible spouse. I'm kidding. Don't do that.
Okay. Final thoughts or wrap it up?
We need to wrap it up.
Okay. Last time we were a little bit unsure about our Instagram handle, but it's the same as our Twitter handle. So we were right there. So you can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at Rachael.
True Horrors Pod.
Yep. True Horrors Pod. And you can rate and review and subscribe to this podcast so other people can know about it. And if you have a movie that you really want us to watch and talk about and tell you about where it came from, you can tweet at us or comment on the Instagram. Next time we will be doing Poltergeist. Yeah.
Oh, fun. I just found that out. So this was fun for all of us.
So thank you guys for listening. We really appreciate it. And see you next time. Hear you next time. You'll hear us.
Yeah, we won't hear anything from you. It's not a telephone.
Yeah, we're done. Bye.
Bye.